Um, on the sort of like while we're talking about this topic, I am kind of just thinking about, you know, obviously releasing this new breaking change and new rules and everything, and also how interesting or challenging it must be to keep up with TypeScript's like release cycle. I mean, they release relatively, it's not too frequently, but you know, there's a steady cadence there, and there is definitely new syntax that's been introduced recently. Has that been a challenge to just like add new syntax as it come up, or is it like relatively easy? And then maybe a follow up question: is there like anything that's coming that you've either seen because you're working on this, or that's been recently released in TypeScript that you're excited about? Something like new in the language?
I think you referenced this earlier, the using keyword. What's really interesting about 2023 era TypeScript, I think, is that there's very little change happening in TypeScript specific syntax. Like we're not getting new constructs like satisfies anymore, or if we are, it's not super often. Most of it is just taking in new JavaScript features. Like the using keyword is a new JavaScript keyword. So now we, instead of having 3 ways of declaring a variable, var let const, 2 of which make us happy, we now have 5 ways, var let const, using, await using. So for those who haven't seen this, don't worry about it. For those who have seen this, TypeScript supports it now. Yay, it's a JavaScript thing. So yeah, every 3 months, TypeScript has a new version. They're actually really kind about how they release them. There's a beta, a release candidate. They have a whole issue pinned with the plan ahead of time. I'd say because we're an independent project, we don't always get to it on time. Sometimes there's a week or two between TypeScript new minor version and typescript-eslint support. But for the most part, recently, the last year or so, it's been mostly fine.
Why did they pick using? It's the worst thing. How do you Google that? JavaScript using? Using JavaScript?
Well, I challenge you. What's a better keyword for this?
I don't know what it does. What does using do? I feel flabbergasted. I don't know about the new JavaScript feature. I'm blindsided right now.
How could you possibly not know every new feature that comes out to Okay. It's most people will never use this thing. Like it's fine. But the idea is if you create a new thing that needs to be disposed, like let's say you read a file from disk or like make a handler for a file, and it should always call some dispose method. In other languages, some of them have like a disposable concept, which is an object that has a dispose method. In JavaScript now, there is symbol.dispose, which can be used as a key on the object to say if you create this object with the using keyword instead of let or const or var, then once that object is out of scope, so like outside of whatever function or block it's made in, then call symbol.dispose on the object. So like if you have a file, it'll like release the file handle or whatever. And also you can create them asynchronously, which is why we have both using and await using. And the only reason I know this is because we had an issue and then a pull request to implement it in typescript-eslint. I would have never, deeply cared myself because I don't personally do a lot of disposable-oriented programming. But apparently it's quite useful for certain areas of programming, and a lot of people are very excited about this landing in JavaScript and therefore TypeScript.
Yeah, the Atom editor, they had their own event emitter class, and it had disposable as a first class. So it was just like as a first class concept. So you'd create a new event emitter, and it would return a disposable function. You could call it later. And I always like the pattern, but so it's interesting to see them first class that into the language. It is interesting how it sort of like latches on to symbol, and the definition is a little awkward, but I guess it's useful.
That's honestly, I think that's a good example of what we were talking about earlier about evolving as a language or ecosystem. People have been writing JavaScript for so many decades now that we've seen all the common patterns, or a lot of them at least, and we're turning them into language level things like using, and eventually, inshallah, the pipeline operator. So excited. That's like my biggest please add to JavaScript point, pipelines. So some would say that this is complicating JavaScript, the language, that there's more you need to learn. But I would say that previously you already needed to learn it. It's just every project did it some weird, wacky, different way. So now there's one way to learn it, and therefore good docs instead of, well, maybe the project documented it, maybe not. So very, very big excitement here.
Yeah, another one to throw into that bucket that you just described, signals. There's been the uptick in people wanting signals as part of the language, and I think there's even a proposal.
That's exciting.
Yeah, this is reminding me of just like the whole observable. Like we've come from this where we got promises in the language, which is a huge moment, and there is like more real time aspects coming along the pike, but it does feel like it takes a long time to sort of figure these things out. And similar to the pipeline discussion, there's like different ways to implement pipelines, and all the sort of functional programmers coming out of the woodwork like, no, like do it my way. At this point, I'm just like, do it anyway, please. I want it. I will take whatever you give me.
Yeah, functional programmers and hard opinions.
Would have guessed.
Truth of the universe.
Yeah, it is a thing. I think it's there are always like hard fault opinions. You've had to deal with a lot of pain over the years, and you've like,
Yeah. Well, I have to imagine that when someone works in a paradigm that works really well for them and is beautiful and clean, the way functional is, it is beautiful and clean. And then they have to go back to the rest of the world where we have like immutable references and you don't get those beautiful guarantees. It is rightfully annoying to not have it as pure and beautiful as it was before.